The RDA is bullshit, you guys, just like calories. The RDA was invented after World War II, and the test subjects were unhealthy, deficient people who ate plants. The test subjects were not tested for their insulin levels. Nobody gave a shit about that back then. The more insulin you produce, the more your needs of vitamins and minerals goes up. Those people needed a lot of magnesium. They needed a lot of vitamin C. They needed a lot of zinc. They needed a lot of potassium. They had to process the carbohydrate plant matter that they were taking in. You don't need a lot if you're not hyperproducing insulin.
Whew. Okay, I always have to take a deep breath because some of these influencers make me sweaty and a little stressed. And Kate, I want to thank you for providing information in a way that feels empowering and is relaxing to take in. And I know for so many people that are new to the space or even have been in the space for a while, it is nice to still learn and maybe take in new perspectives and a deeper understanding of things in a way that doesn't spark more fear and stress. So after watching this clip, I'm wondering what your immediate reaction was.
There's so many words I have other than this individual does create a lot of fear around everything, specifically carbohydrates, specifically fructose, she attributes anything that raises insulin is fat promoting and bad for you. And that can't be further from the truth, right? And so in this clip in general, it's this like, well, these people were eating carbohydrates, plant-based, and so they needed more minerals because they were trying to process all these things. And I'm like, what? Right? Like, you do need more minerals and more nutrients if you actually are running at a high metabolic space, right? When you have more energy demands or more energy coming in, or more fuel coming in, to process that fuel will take more nutrients. You can't have a nutrient deficient diet and expect to work properly just with a ton of fuel. So yes, the requirements of everything will go up. And so the thought that's saying, well, be me and just eat fat, you won't need as much nutrients, and that's a good thing, literally doesn't make any sense to me. And so when you are creating it and more energy, you will just need more of everything, essentially. I always kind of put it into this analogy. If you had a conveyor belt moving your fuel to make energy, you're going to need a lot of workers along that conveyor belt to change the molecule, to move it to the next one, to make your energy. And those are all those workers or your enzymes, they're all needed with nutrients to make them work properly. And so for them to work quicker, right, if you're wanting to turn that conveyor belt up to make more energy, then they all need to work more. We're going to require more from them. So to have a high rate of metabolism, you're going to need a high rate of nutrition. That's just how they go together.
Yeah, I like to think of the analogy just like the burning fire. And I think it was, I don't know who originally described that to me, but I love the imagery of, you're adding more logs in and it's burning faster and you're feeding it, it's going and you're getting more of a return because you're feeding it. Mike, I'm wondering, when someone is increasing their metabolic rate, they're feeling better, they're feeling more energized, and they might be worried that they're burning through their micronutrients too quickly. Are there certain things to keep in mind, certain foods, or even, just certain frames that they should be aware of while they're becoming more metabolically robust?
I think in general, I think covering the micros across the board is going to be important. And I have specific targets that I shoot for a variety of different micronutrients. But for some of the ones here, when you are having carbohydrates and also fat, so it's kind of a weird Primal Bod's perspective here. I don't know her actual name, but her perspective here is
name.
That's her handle though, right?
No, I checked her birth certificate before the call. That's her name.
Okay. So then I got it right.
Yeah.
It's when you use any source, you require micronutrients across the board, fats, proteins, carbs, etc. And if anything, the perspective here for her is weird. It's the diet she promotes can't hit all of the micronutrients. So then she has to shift the argument and say, oh, well, since, my diet doesn't hit all the micronutrients, but you don't even need those micronutrients. That's only for people who eat carbohydrates. And it's just a very weird, fallacious argument to put into place and say, well, because my diet, the assumption here is because she's doing fine on her lower carb, carnivore-esque, whatever diet she's running, and she can't hit the RDA targets, that then the RDA must be BS. And the thing that gets even worse here is that the RDA targets aren't that high. They're not really that high, and they're not even optimal targets. They were just targets to make sure that people didn't have deficiencies. So it's like, I think it was the average daily intake that was required for like 97 to 98% of the population. So they had nutrient sufficiency. It wasn't how much thiamine or vitamin D or magnesium or calcium do you need to optimize for bone mass or for your immune function or for your vascular function or etc. It was just, how do you not get rickets? How do you not get like overt bone breakdown from calcium deficiency or move into like a shifted acid-base balance? These are the things that they were looking at. So to even make this argument is, for me, it's ridiculous to try to sit there and say, hey, like it's actually the RDA is BS. It's actually lower. If she was saying, hey, the RDA is BS and these targets are actually higher, I would been more amenable to the argument. The next thing is that this idea that it's just because these people in this time frame, they were eating plant foods and they had carbohydrates, and the insulin is driving this problem. It is like, again, like this fallacious. Insulin doesn't drive that. Just having insulin in general doesn't mean that you need to have more micronutrients because of insulin. That's not an argument. There's nothing being said there. When you have more substrate, fuel sources, carbs, protein, and fat coming into the system, you need to have micronutrients present to turn those things into energy, whether they're any of those three. So it doesn't matter which one it is. If anything, trying to run a high protein diet and rely on gluconeogenesis, which is something that she promotes, is worse for micronutrient status because it is more wasteful, because you have to first take the protein, the amino acids, and convert it into glucose and then detoxify the amino group through the urea cycle. So you're like, and this is why the energy production from protein oxidation, the amount of energy that's yielded is less than carbohydrate, and it's net negative at the liver for ATP. So it's like the least efficient way to go about it. So it's even counter to her argument. Her perspective is contradictory to sit here and say, oh, you need more insulin and the insulin drives. It's like any substrate uses it. And the way she's promoting to get your carbohydrate through gluconeogenesis is arguably worse for energy production and micronutrient status across the board. So it's a very weird perspective. Not to mention that the people in this time frame where the RDA was set up, during this time there was significantly less obesity, diabetes, and metabolic health concerns related to insulin resistance. So to try to say like, oh, these people are just all had hyper insulin levels, I think is incorrect. I'd say on average, people in that period of time had better metabolic status across the board and lower rates of these diseases than we see today. And maybe argue that the micronutrients are even higher, because in states of insulin resistance, the micronutrients are helpful. There's studies showing a variety of different micronutrients improving features of insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction. I mean, it's one of the strategies I use to help people improve their health. So to try to make this argument that we should be having less just because your diet can't hit it, I think is a disservice to people in general. And the argument be like, you need to have more micronutrients to correct metabolic dysfunction on top of making appropriate dietary changes to not only improve the response to insulin, because the problem is not insulin, the problem is the response to insulin. And that's through issues in the cell with the metabolic flux of substrate. So you need to correct that, and micronutrients are part of the problem. So shifting the argument to RDAs or BS and we should be having, or implying that we should be having less, I think is just like, the whole perspective is just the net negative. It's just to support this idea that, we should just be on these low carb diets, and we can't, since we're on these low carb diets and it's kind of hard to hit these targets, then the RDA is BS and we should be lower in the micros. It's a very weird perspective to take across the board. I don't know where she got this stuff, because I'm trying to find papers to be like, does insulin increase micronutrients? Or it's like, there's nothing supporting it. It's just in states of insulin resistance, higher amounts of vitamin D were helpful. Higher amounts of magnesium were helpful. Not that the insulin was just increasing requirements. The derangement may, but I don't think it's just through insulin.
Yeah, I'm not sure where she got these ideas either.
I think they're out of the thin air.
This
brings them in. Oh, insulin. Oh yeah, let's just make a video. And I'll wear a
What-
jacket. It looks furry. And now, believe me.
Yeah,
She's primal in her jacket.
That's right, a primal jacket.
Found the
Totally.
ideas at Burning Man.
That's right.
Jay, when you
is.
found this clip, what was your immediate reaction? I mean, with the ideas coming out of thin air, which one stood out at you the most as being maybe the most ridiculous or the most even problematic when these are being shared? And I mean, these are really popular videos on Instagram. I mean, this one, can't remember exactly how many views or likes it had, but in the thousands.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about this in so many other clips, but it's so frustrating and like dishonest on their end to be creating these kinds of clips and just be making things up. And it's so disappointing, so sad to see that people don't know the difference, right? They don't know that there's no evidence, physiological mechanism, any reasoning why this would be true. Like they just don't have that understanding going in. And so they see this and they believe it. And that's, I mean, it's criminal, honestly. I don't know, but it's one of those things where someone brings up a concern with the diet and there's no actual, like they can't explain it away. And so, or they can't, there's no retort against it. So they have to say, oh, well, the parameter you're using is wrong, right? On a low carb diet, you're going to have lower T3, you're going to see lower testosterone, but you just don't need as much T3 because you're not doing glucose metabolism. Forget about the fact that T3 also affects stomach acid production and immune function and testosterone production and cognitive function and all of the rest. Like that's not important. It's because you're not wasting it while burning glucose. You don't need the T3. And you have that same thing here. It's like, yes, it's really hard to get enough magnesium and vitamin C and potassium on a carnivore diet, or basically impossible, but you don't need those because the reason why you think you need them is because people were eating toxic plant matter. And there's no basis for it. It's the same as if someone who was a vegan on the other side was saying, yeah, my diet's deficient in B12, but you don't actually need B12. Like that's a myth. That was based on people who are eating meat. But if you're not eating meat, you don't need B12. And it's like, well, that's just look at anything related to B12 in human physiology, and you'll know that that's not true. You don't just get to make those things up. So yeah, I mean that's I think the bigger framework, but the reality is even the opposite. So, like you, Mike, I was trying to see, is there anything to suggest that insulin is going to cause the wasting of nutrients, especially the ones she said, magnesium, vitamin C, zinc, potassium, to process the carbs, anything like that? And there's nothing pointing to that. If anything, having glucose and having insulin helps with the retention of magnesium and potassium and sodium, and calcium even as well, all of the electrolytes, which is why you see people getting really major problems with cramps on low carb and carnivore diets. And I didn't realize how severe those issues were until I've talked to some people who have experienced them, where they're like waking up in the middle of the night with like these really intense cramps. Some people will describe it as like some of the worst pain they've ever experienced. Like it can be really intense. And the lack of insulin and carbohydrates is directly implicated in the deficiency in those things. It's not a situation where they don't need the magnesium because they're on low carb. They still need the magnesium and they're not getting it, and they're not retaining it. So not only are you getting less in your diet because you don't have good nutrient sources there for these specific nutrients, but then also you're not retaining it, you're excreting it, you're losing it. And so it's really, I think, the opposite of what she's saying here. And she's not even pointing to, I guess you could say, the one clear micronutrient that you do need more of when you're utilizing carbs versus fats, which is thiamine, vitamin B1, which you need for pyruvate dehydrogenase. Like that's the one you could point to. You could say you don't need as much thiamine on a low carb diet, but obviously it doesn't fit with the narrative she's trying to put forth here because she's trying to talk about these other nutrients. But yeah, there's really no basis for what she's saying. And there's this other straw man that she brings up, which is that these people were eating plant matter or they were eating carbs, and so they were hyperinsulinemic. They had excess insulin levels. And this is something that I see repeated everywhere. It's a ridiculous straw man, and you wouldn't know that. When you're in this space, like when you're in the low carb space, the carnivore space, you're inundated with that content, and everyone's telling you, those other people, they don't know that eating carbs raises your blood sugar and raises your insulin and that that's bad for you. They just don't know. Like they've never thought about that. They haven't recognized that this is causing hyperglycemia and hyperinsulinemia. And it's just so far from the truth. It's such a dishonest straw man. The people who were, as you said, Mike, the people who they were testing when they were looking for RDAs were certainly not hyperinsulinemic. They were certainly not insulin resistant. And the images and videos that they showed in this, like in her presentation here, in her clip, were not of people who appear that way. And this conflation of eating carbs and insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, and hyperglycemia is just ridiculous. None of us are saying you should eat carbs and become hyperinsulinemic or hyperglycemic, but what we are saying is you can eat carbs and have healthy levels of insulin and glucose and be insulin sensitive, and eating carbs is actually an important part of that. And so, yeah, it was just this other kind of throwaway comment she had, and it's just all over, as you said, Kate, like it's all of her content is like that. And hopefully someone who is coming from her following will see this and begin to question some of those quips that she has a little bit more.
Yeah, she does seem to get about 50% haters and agreeers on her when you do read her content. She definitely gets a lot of people with like, what are you talking about? But sometimes things go viral just because they're crazy.
Yeah, controversy is exciting. People are getting their dopamine hits on Instagram and they can't stop.
If you enjoyed that clip, you'll definitely want to download the free Energy Balance Food Guide. The Energy Balance Food Guide will help you determine exactly what to eat to optimally support your metabolism and help you lose weight, improve your digestion, get amazing sleep, boost your energy, and so much more. The Food Guide makes it extremely easy to get started with a bioenergetic approach to optimizing your health. So head over to jfeldmanwellness.com/guide to download your free Energy Balance Food Guide.